couple of weeks ago now, I showed you guys Fallout: The Frontier, what is shaping up to be the largest Fallout mod to ever come out. There are a lot of mods that hypothetically will end up taking that crown, but this is one that actually is in its final stages of production. No exact release date has been given on this one, but it's described as just being months away and mostly in the final stages of polish at this point. If you guys missed my first video, I do highly recommend you check it out. Watch that one and then come back to this one, as it's more of a continuation on that information. But what this is a DLC-sized or really new game-sized mod for Fallout New Vegas, taking place during the same time frame as New Vegas, but prior to the Battle of Hoover Dam. With one of the major switch-ups being this is in Portland, Oregon, and you get a very distinctive snowy climate, which is not only a visual change, but it also brings certain freezing and hypothermia factors and gameplay elements you'll have to worry about. Since my last video, we've actually got some raw gameplay of exploration in the Frontier, giving us a better look at its world space. Separately, there's also been a dev blog to come out, so we'll go over each of those, but also the lead developer himself reached out and has provided quite a bit in the way of exclusive information, images, and even a ton of gameplay to give us a much better idea of what to expect, and there's definitely a lot to unpack from that. From some of the new gameplay we get a look at, one of the biggest changes you could see coming with the Frontier is in the world space. It has a similar bleak nature compared to Fallout New Vegas' Mojave, that one being a desolate desert, this one being an intimidating and scary looking winter, specifically a nuclear winter. But there's actually a lot more going on than even just that. In some of the gameplay, you could periodically see vertibirds flying overhead, and in general, it's described how with this world space, there's a lot more going on. It's comparatively sized to that of the Mojave, but this one is much more densely packed. So quite often you'll be able to find something to do, whether it be friendly scavengers, a ton in the way of hostile creatures, and even hostile NPC enemies. They specifically took time to place down these little encampments and enemy spawns all throughout, so it does keep things interesting. And we've discussed in the past how even dependent on things like the time of day, different enemies will spawn. In some of the gameplay, we could see a wide variety of these different enemy types, some of them being somewhat familiar, but other ones being totally unique and custom, although fitting in very well into Fallout. Out of all the gameplay I watched through, which is almost all of it thus far, at no point did I really see an NPC that seemed out there, unfitting for the world. And to make this a little bit more simple, to give some concrete numbers around this, if you look at Fallout New Vegas plus all 4 of its DLCs, it has 498 interiors. But with the current build of the Frontier, which has a slightly smaller world space than Fallout New Vegas by default, it actually has 500 interiors. So more than New Vegas plus all DLCs while occupying a smaller space. And overall, it's really described that with this mod, it's very possible to play through the entire mod and never discover certain locations, giving you a lot of incentive for replayability or just re-exploration. There are 4 major towns as well as many more minor faction bases and a lot to explore but also re-explore. They really wanted to replicate that feeling of, even after being a veteran of this mod, you could play it again and discover new content that you simply haven't seen before. But speaking of this new content, even though the world space and the world overall has a lot of new and custom things going on, there's also just a lot of items that are totally new and interesting. All throughout you could hear a variety of things, whether it be new music, new weapons, or even some of the new weathers in action. And at many points throughout this video and some of the new gameplay, if you actually take a look at it, it really feels like you're watching a trailer or a gameplay reveal for a totally new Fallout.
You need something? Guarding this random spot of land, like always.
Obviously, this one would be a little bit more dated than some of the more modern ones, but all throughout I saw so much custom content that it's honestly hard to list off all of it. But even just to illustrate this, looking at some of these inventories or some of the vendors, how many of those items are repeats? You'll find that most of this is totally new and unique. And for several of the weapons, they actually are pretty custom and interesting. they recently shared some gameplay of the Jericho specifically and its custom sound effects. This, of course, being one of the larger weapons of the mod, and specifically meant to be an anti-vehicle item, as yes, vehicles are a component of this. I talked more in depth in my previous one, but this seems like one of the first Fallout experiences that will have vehicles as a core and seemingly very well fleshed out aspect, which that alone gets me excited. Enemies will use vehicles, you'll be able to use vehicles, and they will have certain mechanics like health, fuel, and dynamic damage. And of course, throughout this, you can even find some nods to previous Fallout games, which are definitely appreciated. It seems like this really is going to be one of those mods that has depth to a degree where you can have little Easter eggs like this that you probably will miss on first playthroughs. But as it stands right now, two of the major things the Frontier development team is concerned with is polish, but also voice work. That's really where they find themselves currently in the development cycle. As far as polish, that being optimization and bug fixing, they've actually been doing quite a bit to make sure this is a solid experience on release, which is without a doubt one of the faults some of the other large-scale Fallout mods have suffered from, but this one can learn from their mistakes. They describe putting a lot of effort and time into this. It's not one of those experiences where it was just feature complete and then they decided to ship it. Even little things right now are getting attention. In the recent dev blog, they actually described how they finished creating custom icons for every single armor in this mod, as well as ground and female versions of those armors, which frankly is more than you could say for most New Vegas standalone armor mods. And yet this one has dozens upon dozens of new and custom armors, much of which you could actually see in some of the gameplay. But also, one of the other things this mod has really shined at thus far is voice acting. This is large in part made possible by collaboration with the Creators Network and Casting Call Club. With these two working together, they could actually get something that sounds like this.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chetty, the physician here at Goose Hollow Clinic. How can I help you today? All right then. We are always here if you need medical treatment. Stay safe out there.
You hear about the Hanged Man? Now that's a real hero.
You made a mistake coming here. You're not walking out of here alive, yet here you stand before me.
Which obviously does sound quite a bit better than the typical voice acting you find from Fallout mods, which oftentimes is one of its weak points. All throughout the gameplay, we could hear many voices, and they're all of a certain quality. That meaning they sound good, at least good enough to me. They also shared several images with me, and this shows some of the more custom or interesting aspects of this mod, as it really is one of those mods that's doing things that are simply unprecedented, taking us to places we've never been before. That, of course, one being with the nuclear winter, but separately also things like space. Space is going to be a component of this, and space gameplay is also going to be one, with things like low gravity. Separately, you could see some of the equipment and armors from the three major factions. We know with this, you're getting things like the NCR, the Legion, and also a new faction with the Crusaders, that made up of former Brotherhood of Steel members. Overall though, this just looks incredible. From these images to even again some of that gameplay as I was describing it before. Watch some of the gameplay. You could see just how much custom content is here. It really looks like a new Fallout game. You could really do proper breakdowns on all of this, trying to dissect every little piece of information, all of these new weapons, armors, and even other features that are being shown. After making my original video, I was really left thinking a lot about the Frontier. This is one of those mods that I'm really excited for. I feel like it's going to be a major presence in the Fallout modding scene and really just Fallout scene overall. And thankfully, again, the wait isn't too much longer. We're in the final stretch now. So I'm sure as time goes on, there'll be a lot more to keep up to date with, which speaking of, I will have links to everything I talked about as well as the Frontier's social media and YouTube channel down below. Some of the best places where you can keep up to date in real time as they share some additional information. We know a new trailer is on the way. And again, for those of you that missed that first upload, I really recommend you check it out. I didn't want to talk about everything I mentioned in that one to not create too much overlap, but things like vehicles, animals, and the factions I go way more in depth with in that video, as well as just a better broad overview. This mod is doing a lot. There are a lot of different assets and facets coming with it, and there's a lot to unpack and explore. Much of the new gameplay I showed off in that original video is in no way featured in this one, so definitely check it out, even if you're just somewhat interested in this. After making these two videos, I do genuinely ask myself, what am I more excited for? Wastelanders or Fallout the Frontier? Both look top tier and extremely enticing and exciting, and it's going to be very interesting how we're getting both of these as potentially free content around similar timeframes. But either way, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. So once again, I thank you all for watching, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.